Get your best doctor in here. I had just stepped out of the staff elevator when I saw my husband, Derek Hayes, shouting outside the operating room. What was he doing here? Didn't he say he was on a business trip today, couldn't be with me on our 7th wedding anniversary? Before I could even process it, he stormed up to a nurse and started making a scene. You have to save my wife and child, he barked. Or I'll make sure this hospital goes bankrupt. My wife. The words hit me like a lightning strike. If she was his wife, then who was I? I stood there, frozen, still trying to breathe through the shock, when a young doctor hurried toward me. Dr. Miller, perfect timing. All the chief physicians are in surgery and can't break away. Please, you need to go in. I took a slow breath, clenched my fist beneath my gown, and walked toward the double doors. Derek stepped in front of me, blocking my path, his eyes blazing. You're the surgeon? He didn't recognize me. Under my cap and mask, to him I was just another set of scrubs. Maybe he simply didn't expect me to be here. I'd been temporarily assigned to this community hospital last month as part of a rotation. I remembered telling him. He'd been staring at his phone, barely listening. Sir, I said evenly, please step aside. I moved past him, but he raised his voice again. There aren't any male doctors in there, are there? I don't want any male staff in the room with my wife. You have to be kidding, I thought. And then a colder question surfaced, sharp and unavoidable. Who exactly was this wife he kept talking about? After scrubbing in and sterilizing, I entered the operating room. A pregnant woman lay on the table, eyes half-lidded, breathing unevenly. When I saw her face clearly, my stomach dropped. Tiffany Reed. She was Derek's cousin-in-law, married to Major Ryan Davis, a military officer who was often deployed. Tiffany used to call Derek over for little emergencies, a broken appliance, a power outage, a leaky sink. I'd been buried in work and hadn't paid attention to how often those calls happened. I never imagined what was really going on. A nurse handed me the chart. I scanned it quickly. Tiffany was 8 months pregnant. She'd gone into premature labor after ignoring medical advice and overexerting herself. The baby's vitals were unstable, and we couldn't risk waiting. 8 months. A memory clicked into place like a lock snapping shut. Ryan hadn't been back in almost a year. The math didn't leave room for excuses. Derek and I had been married for years without conceiving. My cycles had always been irregular, and last year I gently suggested he get checked too. He'd refused, flatly, insisting there was nothing wrong with him. Even my mother-in-law had taken his side. Now I understood why he'd been so confident. He didn't doubt himself at all. Because he'd already proven he could get someone pregnant. My assistant leaned in. Dr. Miller, should we prep for a C-section? I glanced at the fetal monitor, then at the ultrasound results. At this stage, the baby had a strong chance, if we acted fast. The irony was almost unbearable. I was about to operate on the woman my husband was calling his wife. But I was a doctor. And no matter how hard my chest ached, the patient in front of me was still a patient. Yes, I said, voice steady. Prepare anesthesia. While we worked through pre-op, Tiffany suddenly grabbed at the rails and cried out, "Let my husband in. I don't want to be alone." The nurse tried to soothe her. "Ms. Reed, that isn't allowed without prior approval." Approval? Tiffany snapped. Husbands are always there on TV. Let him in. Once the anesthesia began to take effect, Tiffany's panic didn't fade, it sharpened into entitlement. She kept demanding, yelling, insisting. "My husband is an executive at a listed company," she threatened. "Be careful, or I'll make you all regret it." I kept my face blank behind the mask. "Your actual husband is an active duty officer," I thought. "And you're standing here calling another man your husband like it's nothing." Tiffany glared at us. "If you don't let him in, I'm not doing this." My assistant looked at me, unsure. I swallowed the anger that wanted to rise. "Call the director," I said. "I can't authorize it." Director Thompson responded quickly and, to my disbelief, approved it. Paperwork could be sorted out later. A minute later, Derek walked in wearing green scrubs. Tiffany's voice instantly softened into a helpless whine. "Oh, darling," she murmured, reaching for him. "It hurts so much. I can't take it." I watched, detached, as he squeezed her hand and put on a performance of tenderness. "Just hold on," he said. "After the baby's born, I'll give you a reward." Tiffany's eyes gleamed. That limited edition bag from H brand. Okay, Derek said without hesitation. As many as you want. Something inside me went quiet. Not forgiveness, nothing like that. Just a cold, clean distance, like a door closing. I told myself, over and over, Chloe, you're a doctor. You have professional ethics. No matter who is on this table, you do your job. I positioned my hands. Picked up the scalpel. As I made the first incision, Derek leaned in to watch and immediately went pale. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. I didn't stop. I moved through the next layer with practiced precision while Tiffany shrieked, "Darling." "Derek. What happened?" My assistant steadied her. "Ms. Reed, please lie still." Two nurses rushed to drag Derek aside. I knew exactly what it was. He couldn't handle the sight of blood, yet he'd forced himself in anyway. For her. We delivered the baby, a tiny boy, fragile and underweight, struggling more than he should have been. The cord had been tight, and the first seconds were tense. "Is he out?" Tiffany demanded, voice shaking with impatience. "It's a boy," my assistant said. Tiffany smiled instantly. Then her face tightened. "Why isn't he crying?" No one answered her. I cleared the airway, stimulated the baby gently, and waited. A moment later, the room filled with a thin, urgent cry. Derek tried to sit up, until he saw the newborn up close. Then he went slack again, fainting for a second time. The midwife did a quick assessment, then said, "He's weak. He needs to go to the NICU for monitoring." "Nobody's taking my baby anywhere," Tiffany shouted. "What is this, an excuse to charge extra because you think my husband has money?" My patience, already worn to the bone, finally thinned. I kept my voice low and calm. Babies with unstable vitals need close monitoring. If you don't trust this hospital, you can request a transfer once the baby is stable enough. Tiffany bristled. "What's with your attitude?" "Transfer, then," she snapped, lifting her chin. Who would choose a rundown place like this if they had a choice? I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that mattered. I left the remaining work to my team and stepped out, desperate for 5 minutes of air, only to find chaos waiting in the corridor. A woman dripping with jewelry was shouting at staff, voice cutting through the hallway. "How could the baby be born early? I'll sue all of you. I'll sue you until you lose everything." My mother-in-law. Shirley Hayes was blocking the midwife, physically preventing her from taking the baby toward the NICU. The midwife, strained but professional, tried to explain. "Ma'am, the mother went into premature labor. That's why we performed the C-section." "A C-section?" Shirley screeched. "Who told you to do that? Babies delivered naturally are smarter. Get your director out here." I stared at her, stunned, not by the ignorance, but by the sheer volume of it. I didn't want any part of their mess. I wanted to go home, file for divorce, and cut every toxic thread tying me to these people. I tried to walk around her. Shirley noticed me and stepped directly into my path. "Was it you? Did you do the C-section on my daughter-in-law?" I answered coolly. The C-section was performed with the patient's consent and the attending team's approval. "If you have an issue, speak to your son." She didn't recognize me either. She leaned in, spittle flying as she shouted. "How dare you talk to me like that? Do you even know who I am? You're just a doctor." Behind her, the midwife seized the opening and pushed the bassinet toward the elevator. Shirley whipped back to me, fury focused. "How dare you make my grandson come early? What's your agenda? Are you trying to ruin him?" People in the corridor started murmuring. A few families, already exhausted from waiting, began telling her to stop. Phones came out. Someone was recording. The argument escalated fast. At one point, Shirley swung at an older woman who told her to calm down. I stepped in immediately. "Ma'am," I warned, "if you keep causing trouble, I'm calling security." "How dare you threaten me?" Shirley screamed. "You people." I moved to shield the older woman and stepped back. "Please step aside for one moment." And then, when I wasn't braced for it, Shirley shoved me hard. My heels slipped. The corridor tilted. I hit the floor. For a second, everything blurred, lights too bright, voices too far away. A deep, dragging pain twisted low in my abdomen. Hands reached for me. "Doctor, are you okay?" I tried to sit up, but my body swayed, refusing to cooperate. Then I felt it, warm wetness spreading, and the sudden, terrifying understanding that something was wrong. I went still. Just then, Derek came out with Tiffany, who was still on a gurney. Derek's face tightened when he saw Shirley. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Shirley latched onto him immediately, twisting the story before anyone else could speak. "Your assistant told me you brought Tiffany here to give birth. Tell me, son, did this quack trick you into a C-section? You didn't even consult me about something that serious. These dishonest hospitals scare people into spending a fortune." Staff snapped back, unable to take it anymore. "Don't slander us. Her water broke early. The C-section was necessary." Shirley planted her hands on her hips. "How could my daughter-in-law's water break for no reason? Don't try to fool me." My jaw clenched. I couldn't stand hearing her say my daughter-in-law again, like she had any right to that word. Through the pain, I forced the sentence out. "She went into premature labor because your son and your daughter-in-law ignored medical advice and had intercourse late in pregnancy." Derek's shoulders went rigid. He said nothing. Shirley froze, stunned for half a breath, then exploded. "Lies. My son would never do that." A nurse hurried to my side. "Dr. Miller, don't engage. Let's get you up." But Shirley wouldn't stop. She grabbed at me as if she could physically keep me there. "Stop. You think you can just run off? You're responsible for my grandson." Another sharp cramp seized me. Cold sweat broke out across my back. Panicked, I shoved Shirley away. She stumbled into the wall, then immediately started clutching herself dramatically. "Ouch. My head. You evil." The nurse stared at her. "Ma'am. You hit your back." "I don't care." Shirley wailed. "Apologize to me or this isn't over." Then she turned on Derek. "Your mother is being bullied. What are you standing there for?" Derek looked at me, at the nurse holding my arm, at my pale face, and instead of concern, his expression hardened, annoyed, as if I were an inconvenience in the middle of his real life. He pointed at me. "Apologize to my mother." I sucked in a shallow breath, barely able to keep my voice steady. "My stomach hurts." "Please," I whispered to the nurse. "Get me out of here first." The nurse tried to guide me away. Derek grabbed my arm, roughly. "Where do you think you're going? Don't even think about leaving without apologizing." The nurse tried to intervene and got shoved aside. I turned my head toward him, my voice shaking with pain and something colder underneath. "Derek. Look closely at who I am." He frowned, irritation flickering into confusion. His gaze traveled up from my name badge to my eyes, the only part of my face not covered. I watched the exact second recognition hit. His pupils widened. The color drained from his face. "Chloe?" He whispered. "You. What are you?" My mask hid my expression, but my voice was ice calm. "Yes. Your wife. The one you couldn't be with today because of a business trip. Now move." For one long, suspended heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Shirley's shrill voice cut through the corridor. "What nonsense are you talking about? My son's wife is in there on that bed." The nurse beside me suddenly gasped. "Doctor, you're bleeding." I blinked. "What?" She pointed at the floor. A dark stain was spreading beneath my shoes, soaking through the thin fabric of the scrub pants at my inner thigh. A cold wave rolled through me, followed by a deep, wrenching cramp low in my abdomen that nearly buckled my knees. "No. No, no." "Dr. Miller, sit down," another nurse said urgently, grabbing my arm. Shirley scoffed. "What kind of performance is this? First you scare my grandson, now you pretend to be sick." Her voice warped, echoing strangely as my vision tunneled. The bright corridor lights blurred into streaks. Someone shouted for a gurney. Hands tried to steady me. The last thing I saw was Derek's stunned, open-mouthed face as the floor rushed up to meet me. Then everything went black. I woke to the steady beep of a monitor and the faint smell of disinfectant that, for once, wasn't comforting at all. The ceiling above me wasn't the oars. This was one of the observation wards. I turned my head. A familiar figure sat in the chair beside my bed, white coat rumpled, stethoscope hanging loose around his neck. "Easy," Dr. Patel said softly when I tried to sit up. "You took a nasty fall?" My throat felt dry. What happened? You fainted in the corridor. Abdominal trauma and acute stress. His expression sobered. Chloe, did you know you were pregnant? My fingers clenched in the blanket. Pregnant? I stared at him. That's not funny. He held my gaze, eyes kind but steady. We ran the labs and ultrasound. You were about 5 weeks. Very early. The embryo never really attached well, and the fall triggered a threat of miscarriage. The word landed like a physical blow. I swallowed hard. Threat, I repeated hoarsely. So? He exhaled. We tried, but with the implantation that poor and the amount of bleeding, it wasn't viable. I'm sorry. For a moment, all the noise in the world vanished. No monitors. No hallway voices. Just a high, hollow ring in my ears. 5 weeks. While Derek was telling me it wasn't a good time yet, my body had quietly been trying to build a life anyway. And his mother had shoved me hard enough to knock it out of me. I stared at the 4th line running into my hand, fingers trembling. I didn't even know, I whispered. I figured. Dr. Patel's voice was gentle. We've stabilized you. Physically you'll recover. But Chloe, you need to report what happened. Being pushed like that? That's assault. I let out a small, humorless laugh. By my mother-in-law. In front of my husband. Who told me to apologize to her while I was bleeding. His jaw tightened. You don't have to stay anywhere near people like that. I turned my head toward the window. Outside, the winter sky was a flat, colorless gray. I'm not going to, I murmured. Not anymore. He hesitated. They're outside, you know. Your husband and his mother. Making a fuss at the nurse's station. Administration is already involved. Of course they were. Do I have to see them? I asked. Not if you don't want to. He stood. I'll tell them you're under observation and not cleared for visitors yet. Get some rest. When you're ready, we can talk about filing an incident report. He moved toward the door. Patel? I called, my voice still rough. He paused. Yeah? Send someone else to finish Tiffany Reed's post-op checks. There was a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Already done? When he left, the room fell quiet again. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, replaying the last few hours in my head. My husband, screaming to save his wife and child. My mother-in-law, trying to block critical care because she didn't like a C-section. Tiffany, calling him darling while bargaining for luxury handbags like they were oxygen. And me, on the floor in my own hospital, bleeding out a child I hadn't even known I had. Something inside me finally snapped, not loudly, not with screaming or tears. It was more like the soft, final click of a lock turning. The door in my chest that had been cracked open, hoping for explanations, excuses, second chances, slammed shut. All that remained was a strange, icy clarity. I turned my head toward the side table. My phone lay there in a clear plastic bag with my belongings. I buzzed the nurse. Can I have my phone? She brought it over with a sympathetic smile. Of course, Dr. Miller. Do you need anything else? Yes, I said. Privacy for 5 minutes. When the door closed, I unlocked my phone. The screen lit up with missed calls. Derek X12. Mom Hayes. Unknown number. A cluster of hospital extensions. My thumb hovered over Derek's name. Then I swiped left and blocked the number. Next, I scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in a long time. Dad. I stared at it for a few seconds, my throat tight, then hit dial. He picked up on the second ring. Chloe? His voice carried that familiar blend of calm authority and quiet warmth. For the first time that day, my eyes stung. Hi, Dad, I said, and my voice wobbled on the second word. There was a beat of silence. What happened? I took a breath, forcing myself to stay composed. Are you still planning to wire $50 million into Hayes Group tomorrow morning? He didn't respond instantly. That's what your husband requested, he said slowly. Bridge funding. He said they had a short-term gap. Why? Every word I spoke next was clean, sharp, stripped of all decoration. Cancel it, I said. Freeze the transfer. Freeze every credit line that has his name on it. Every supplementary card. The silence on the line deepened, turning heavy. Chloe, he said at last, his tone shifting. What did he do? He's been having an affair with Tiffany Reed, I said flatly. She delivered today. 8 months. He brought her in screaming that she was his wife and that if anything happened to his wife and child, he'd bankrupt my hospital. His mother assaulted me in the corridor. I fell. I was 5 weeks pregnant and didn't know. My voice shook, but I kept going. We lost the baby. On the other end, my father's breath hissed in. Where are you? At work. Observation ward. I'm stable. I stared at the ceiling. But, Dad? He was bragging about the $50 million to her. They were talking about how once the money hit, he'd fill the hole in his company books, run another funding round, and then divorce me. Call me Baron and push me out while he married her in style. His words. For a second, my father's composure cracked enough that I heard the raw fury beneath it. That bastard, he said softly. That ungrateful, stupid little bastard. I closed my eyes. The $50 million is bridge capital from Miller Holdings, I reminded him quietly. As long as it hasn't hit their account, it's still yours. Don't give him a single cent. And the black card secondary that you gave me? I made the mistake of letting Derek keep it. Freeze that too. Already done, he said sharply. I'm calling the bank now. Not a penny leaves. And I'll have legal start reviewing every cent we've already invested in Hayes Group. If he touched our money illegally, I'll make sure he coughs up interest in court. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. His voice softened again. Chloe. This is not your fault. You understand that, right? A lump formed in my throat. I should have listened when you said something was off about him. Regret can wait, Dad said. Right now, focus on getting discharged. I'll send a car to pick you up. You're not going back to that penthouse. I wasn't planning to, I said quietly. Good girl, he murmured. Rest for a bit. I'll call you when everything's locked down. When I hung up, my heart wasn't racing. It was strangely calm. I just cut off the blood supply to Derek's company, his lifestyle, his entire illusion of control, with a single phone call. It felt clean. Outside the door, I heard Derek's voice arguing with someone again. I don't care if the NICU needs a deposit. He was yelling. Just put it on file under my name. I'll transfer later. The billing clerk's voice was clipped but polite. I'm sorry, sir, but policy requires payment upfront for this level of neonatal care. Your secondary card was declined. Twice. The system shows it's been frozen by the primary holder. There was a pause. That's impossible, Derek snapped. Try again. A second silence. The clerk again. Declined. Again. Do you have another method of payment? The corridor buzzed faintly with voices, other families waiting, nurses passing, someone's child crying. I lay there listening to my husband's carefully curated world begin to crack. Run my platinum, he said finally. Another pause. I'm afraid that account is also overdrawn, sir. Do you people know who I am? Derek's voice jumped an octave. I'm the COO of a listed company. I can buy this hospital 10 times over. Sir, the clerk cut in calmly, if you continue shouting at staff, we'll have to ask security to escort you out. The NICU will still care for your child on an emergency basis. But we cannot provide the upgraded suite or private services without payment. A security guard's low voice joined in. Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. I pressed my fingertips lightly against my eyes. Tiffany wanted VIP everything. Derek had promised the moon. Now he couldn't even pay for a cloud. Somewhere deep in my chest, something that had been knotting itself for years finally started to unwind. I was discharged early the next morning. Dr. Patel insisted on a few days off. Not a suggestion, he said firmly. If you show up in scrubs before Monday, I'll personally write you up. I promised I wouldn't. When I stepped out of the main entrance, the cold air hit my face like a slap. It woke me up more than any coffee could. My father's driver was waiting with a familiar black sedan. I put my bag in the back, then paused with my hand on the door handle. Through the glass front of the hospital, I could see the billing area. Derek stood at the counter, his once impeccable suit wrinkled, hair a mess, tie askew. His watch, one he liked to brag about, was conspicuously absent from his wrist. Tiffany's mother sat on a plastic chair nearby, cradling her handbag like a life raft. Tiffany herself must have been upstairs. I watched as Derek tried another card. The clerk shook her head. Behind him, a man in a security uniform leaned against the wall, arms folded, clearly waiting for the inevitable. Derek's phone lit up on the counter. My name flashed across the screen. Except it didn't anymore. I changed the contact last night. Wife, red heart emoji, had become Hayes, do not answer. The irony wasn't lost on me. I watched the screen vibrate with his call request for 3 full rings. Then I got into the car and shut the door. Home, Ms. Miller? The driver asked. I took one last look at Derek through the glass as he slammed his fist against the counter in frustration. Yes, I said. Take me home. My parents' house wasn't a house. It was an estate. Growing up, I'd resented the gates, the cameras, the way kids at school sometimes looked at me like I was a walking bank account. Now, as the gate swung open and the car rolled up the long driveway, it felt like exactly what it was. A fortress. As soon as the car stopped, my mother rushed down the front steps, shawl half slipping off her shoulders. Chloe. She opened the door before the driver could and pulled me into a hug so tight it knocked the breath out of me. My baby. I stiffened for a second, then melted into her, the last 24 hours crashing down all at once. I'm okay, I muttered, my voice muffled against her shoulder. No, you're not, she said, her voice shaking. And that's allowed. I pulled back, blinking away the tears that finally swelled, hot and stinging. If I start crying now, I may not stop. Then don't cry yet, she said softly. Come in. Sit. Yell first. Cry later. In this house, you're allowed to do both. My father was waiting in the foyer, hands resting on the handle of his cane. His face was stormy, but when he saw me, his expression softened. He opened his arms. Dad, I said quietly, stepping into his hug. He held me for a long moment, his palm pressed firmly against the back of my head like he used to when I was a child who'd scraped her knee. I spoke to the bank, he said when we pulled apart. Funds are frozen. The bridge loan is cancelled. His access to your supplementary card is gone. For him, yesterday was the last time he used your name to pay for anything. A sharp, clean satisfaction threaded through the ache in my chest. What about the money you've already put into Hayes Group? I asked. Legal and finance pulled an all-nighter, he said grimly. Your husband has been using company accounts like his personal wallet. Some of it touches our capital. Enough to interest a prosecutor. My lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. So he's not just a liar. He's also sloppy. Sloppy thieves are the easiest to hang, my father said coolly. But the rope is yours to pull. Whatever you want to do, I'll back you. I straightened. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my spine was aligned with something solid. Then here's what I want, I said. I want a divorce. I want Hayes Group's board to know exactly what kind of man they put in charge. And I want every cent of Miller Holdings' money that he misused documented and recovered. With interest. My father's mouth twitched. Anything else? Yes. I met his eyes squarely. I want his illusion. His reputation. The version of himself he built on my name and our money. I want all of that gone. A slow, fierce pride lit his face. That, he said, is my daughter talking. It didn't take Derek long to crawl to the one place he'd always assumed would take him back. He showed up at our gate just after sunset, pounding on the intercom like a man possessed. The security feed flashed his face onto the panel in the entry hall. His hair was wild, his suit jacket unbuttoned, shirt collar open. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. Ms. Miller? The head of security asked over the radio. Mr. Hayes is at the gate. He's demanding to see you. My father snorted. Tell them to throw him out. Wait, I said. They both looked at me. I'll see him, I said calmly. There are things that need to be said out loud. And I prefer not to do it in a courtroom hallway. My mother touched my arm. Chloe, you don't have to. I know. I covered her hand briefly. But I want to. We opened the smaller side gate. Derek stumbled through, stopping short when he saw me standing at the top of the stone steps, arms folded. For a heartbeat, his expression was furious. Then it rearranged itself into something pitifully familiar, hurt, pleading, boyish. Chloe, he gasped, and then, to my mild shock, He dropped to his knees on the gravel. Gravel dug into his expensive slacks. He didn't seem to notice. I was wrong, he said, voice cracking. I messed up. I lost my head. Please. Just listen. Just once. I stared down at him for a moment, then spoke, my tone mild. You called another woman your wife, I said. In my hospital. On our anniversary. You threatened to bankrupt my workplace if anything happened to her. Why, exactly, should I listen? He flinched but pressed on. That's over, he rushed out. It was a mistake. I was confused, okay? She said things, made me feel. He cut himself off at my expression. It doesn't matter. The baby is here. He has my last name. We can raise him together. Or not, if that's too much for you. I'll send them away. I'll cut them off. Just tell your father to restart the transfer. Hayes Group will collapse without that money. There it was. The real reason he was here. Not me. Not the baby we'd lost. 50 million. I let the silence stretch until his desperation turned skittish. Derek, I said at last, do you remember what you told Tiffany outside the Or? The part about how I'm stupid and easy to fool and how once the money came in, you'd have the courage to divorce me and sweep me out because I haven't even laid an egg in 3 years? He froze, mouth slightly open. Why, you heard that? Yes. I cocked my head. Clear as day. I was standing outside the door holding a chart while you were promising her an H-brand bag and a mansion. A flush crept up his neck. I was just saying things to keep her calm. She was in labor, Chloe. You of all people should understand. Don't, I cut in, my voice suddenly sharp. Do not use my profession to justify your affair. His jaw clenched. We can work this out, he insisted. We're married. We've built a life. Do you think anyone will believe you if you go around telling these stories? Do you know what divorcing me would do to your reputation? To your parents? Behind me, the front door opened. My father stepped out onto the top of the stairs, flanked by 2 security guards. Son, he said pleasantly, his tone razor thin. You seem to have misunderstood something. Derek's eyes flicked up to him, then back to me. He swallowed. Mr. Miller, he said quickly. Sir. I know how this looks, but... How it looks? My father's smile didn't reach his eyes. It looks like we invested in a young executive with promise and instead nurtured an entitled boy who thinks my daughter and my money are interchangeable. Derek's gaze darted between us. If you pull out now, Hayes Group will go under. Think about your stake. We are, my father said. Miller Holdings is the largest shareholder. Without our support, your shares are worth about as much as the gravel you're kneeling on. Derek's carefully polished mask shattered. You can't do this, he blurted. We're married. Half of what Chloe has is mine. She's tied to my debts. If I sink, she sinks with me. Wrong, I said, pulling a folder from behind my back and tossing it down the steps. It landed in front of him, papers spilling slightly. That's a draft of our divorce agreement. And a summary of your creative accounting. Our lawyers are very confident that with records of your affair and the funds you siphon from company accounts, I will walk away clean. He stared at the papers, then up at me, betrayal morphing into raw anger. Chloe, he said hoarsely, you're really going to do this? After everything I've done for you? I supported you through med school. You supported my ego, I said coolly. By telling everyone you had a doctor wife while I worked double shifts, and you took my parents' money to play CEO. I appreciate the PR. That's about it. He lurched to his feet, papers crumpling in one fist. If you walk away now, he snarled, I swear I'll make noise. I'll tell every reporter in the city you're heartless, that you abandoned your husband and his infant son. I'll drag your name through the mud. You think being Dr. Chloe Miller will save you from that? Go ahead, I said. Just make sure you spell my name right. The MD tends to look good in print. My father lifted his cane and pointed toward the gate. Security, he said, his voice suddenly very cold. If Mr. Hayes comes within 500 meters of this property again, you know what to do. Yes, sir, the head guard said. Derek went pale. You can't just throw me out. We can, my father said. And we are. 2 guards walked down the steps. Derek took a frantic step backward. "Chloe," he shouted. "Chloe, I'm facing payroll, suppliers, loan payments, I have people threatening me. There are debts you don't know about. If the company nosedives, it's not just me who suffers. Our employees shouldn't have their livelihoods tied to a man who gambles with other people's money," I said evenly. "Don't worry. I have plans for them." I nodded once at the guards. They took him by the arms and steered him toward the gate. He dug his heels into the gravel, twisting his neck to look back at me, eyes wild. "This isn't over," he yelled. "You think you've won, but once my son grows up, once he's old enough, he'll inherit everything. He'll come for what you stole from us." "For his sake," I said quietly, "I hope by then he's old enough to understand that what I did was protect him from becoming you." The gate swung shut on his furious face. For the first time since I'd married him, there was a solid barrier between his world and mine. And I was the one who'd closed it. 2 days later, Hayes Group exploded. Not literally. But on the financial news ticker, it might as well have. Hayes Group faces internal probe. Major investor freezes funding. Allegations of misappropriation under review. Employees panicked. Suppliers called. Minor shareholders tried to dump their stock before it tanked. I watched the first wave of chaos from my father's study, sipping tea while analysts speculated on whether Hayes Group could survive. "Ready?" my father asked quietly. I set the cup down and turned to face him. "Yes." Miller Holdings called an emergency board meeting. Derek tried to attend. The guards at the building entrance, now very familiar with his face, escorted him right back out. "I'm the COO," he shouted, struggling. "You can't bar me from my own building." "Read your contract," one of the guards said, unimpressed. "Board has authority to suspend you." They did. Yesterday. Inside, I walked into the conference room in a tailored navy suit instead of scrubs, my hair pinned back, makeup sharp and understated. The conversation died as soon as I stepped through the door. Most of the men at the table were older than my father. Several had known me since I was a teenager who trailed after him in hospital corridors, hugging a textbook. They stood out of habit. "Ms. Miller," one of them said, recovering first. "We didn't expect." "Me?" I finished, smiling slightly. "I know." I took my place at the head of the table, not because of symbolism, but because my father quietly pulled out that chair, set it where Derek used to sit, and dropped a stack of audit reports in front of it. "Let's not waste time," I said, flipping open the top folder. "Here's the situation." For the next 40 minutes, I walked them through the numbers. The inflated marketing budgets. The consulting payments to shell companies tied to Derek's friends. The misuse of bridge funds to cover personal credit lines instead of product development. By the time I finished, several directors looked ill. "This is worse than we were told," one murmured. "It's what happens when you confuse charm with competence," I said. "The good news is, the underlying business isn't rotten. The core tech has potential. It just hasn't been funded properly because someone preferred champagne to R&D. "Are you saying," another director asked slowly, "that you intend to take over?" "I'm saying Derek Hayes is suspended from all executive duties effective immediately," I replied. "Miller Holdings will support a restructuring on one condition: I'm appointed interim CEO to stabilize operations while we search for a permanent candidate." "You?" one of the more traditional board members blurted. "But you're a surgeon?" I supplied. "Yes. A surgeon who spent her life learning how to operate under pressure, how to make decisions with incomplete information, and how to cut out what's infected before it spreads." A few of the older men almost smiled at that. "And more importantly," I added, tapping the stack of files, "a shareholder whose family currently holds your lifeline. If you don't want Miller pulling out entirely and letting Hayes Group crash, you'll give me 90 days. Silence. Then the director at the far end of the table cleared his throat. 90 days, he repeated. "And if we don't like what we see? Then you replace me," I said easily. "And Miller Holdings will find other, more disciplined homes for its capital." Another silence. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. Those 90 days were the hardest I'd ever worked outside an OR. I spent mornings at Miller General, finishing my rotation and transitioning my cases. Afternoons and nights, I lived in Hayes Group's offices. We cut the deadweight projects that existed only on paper. We renegotiated bloated vendor contracts Derek had signed as favors. We redirected funds into the only two product lines that had a real shot at saving the company. I fired the finance director who'd helped Derek fudge numbers and handed his files straight to our legal team. He started cooperating with investigators very quickly. I met with department heads one by one. Some were defensive. Some were furious. Some were scared. With Derek, one manager blurted, "At least we knew the rules. Take him to drinks, laugh at his jokes, make sure his ego felt good, and your budget got approved." "I don't know what you want." "I want results," I said. "And accountability. If you can't work under those rules, resign now and save us both time." By the end of the first month, the bleeding had slowed. By the end of the second, we'd signed a partnership with a major research institute that sent Hayes Group stock creeping back from the brink. By the end of the third, I stood on a small stage in front of a packed auditorium, presenting our new flagship device while financial journalists scribbled furiously. Somewhere backstage, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Proud of you," it read. "Try not to forget to eat between interviews. Dad." I smiled at the screen. I was no longer Derek's wife, the quiet doctor. I was Dr. Chloe Miller, surgeon CEO who saved Hayes Group from imploding under its own corruption. The labels didn't matter as much as the reality. For the first time in years, my life was built on my own choices, not someone else's lies. As for Derek and Tiffany? The last time I saw them was almost 6 months later. I was leaving a downtown conference, heels clicking on wet pavement, when a commotion near the subway entrance caught my eye. At first, I didn't recognize him. The man rummaging through a trash can, snatching half-eaten burgers from discarded wrappers, looked at least 10 years older than the one I'd married. His hair was overgrown and streaked with gray. His once tailored shoulders hunched under a stained jacket. Then he turned his head, and even under the grime, I saw it. Derek. Tiffany sat on the curb nearby, hair dull and tangled, makeup smeared into permanent shadows under her eyes. A faint pale line ran from her cheekbone toward her ear, thin but unmistakable. Some collector's idea of a warning, probably. They were arguing over a sandwich. "I found it," Derek snarled, yanking at the bread. "Give it to me. I was the one who lost everything for you?" Tiffany shrieked back, clawing at his hand. "You said your wife would pay, that we'd be kings. Where's your money now, Mr. Executive?" Pedestrians skirted around them, some staring, some averting their eyes. My driver glanced back at me from the curb. "Should I call security, Dr. Miller?" he asked quietly. "They're causing a scene. Someone might recognize you." I shook my head, watching Derek finally wrench the sandwich free and take a vicious bite while Tiffany cursed him. "No," I said softly. "Leave them." I opened the car door and slid into the back seat. As we pulled away, I looked out the window one last time. They were still there, two people who had treated other human beings like stepping stones and then been surprised when the ground crumbled beneath them. They weren't in my world anymore. They were in the one they'd built for themselves. My phone buzzed with a new email, an invitation to speak at a medical leadership summit about balancing clinical work and executive roles. I smiled. "Home, please," I told the driver. He nodded and merged into traffic, the city lights blurring into soft streaks as we drove. I leaned back against the seat, one hand resting lightly on my abdomen. It still hurt sometimes, in quiet moments, when I thought about the child I'd lost. But the pain wasn't empty anymore. It was a reminder, not of what had been taken from me, but of what I'd refused to keep losing. "Goodbye," I whispered under my breath, not to Derek, not to Tiffany, but to the woman who had once stood in a hospital elevator, clutching hope like it was oxygen while her husband lied about business trips. Goodbye to her. Hello to whatever came next.